The first time she begged him to kill her, the wind was howling like a wounded animal across the empty plains. Ethan Cole had seen death before. He had buried his father with his own hands. He had watched cattle freeze in brutal winters and neighbors bleed out after drunken disputes. But he had never seen a woman stand in front of a loaded rifle, chin lifted to the sky, and whisper with steady defiance, "Kill me, or be my husband." She stood no more than a few yards from him, wrapped in a torn wool blanket, snow clinging to her dark braids. Her eyes, black as midnight rivers, did not blink. Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger out of instinct, not intention. He had heard rumors for weeks: an Apache widow stealing chickens, slipping into barns at night, vanishing into the hills before dawn. Ranchers had sworn they would shoot her on sight. He hadn't believed the thief would be a woman. He certainly hadn't expected her to walk straight toward him. "Drop the knife," he said, his voice steady but low. She let the blade fall into the snow without hesitation. "I am not here to fight." "Then why are you here?" Her jaw trembled, not with fear, but with exhaustion. "Because I am done running." The wind lifted her blanket, revealing how thin she was. Hunger had carved shadows beneath her cheekbones. She looked no older than 25, though grief had etched years into her face. "I buried my husband 2 moons ago," she said. "The fever took him. The soldiers burned our camp after. There is nothing left." Ethan lowered the rifle slightly. He knew what soldiers did. He had seen smoke rising beyond the hills weeks earlier. He had chosen not to ask questions. "You've been stealing from my land," he said. "Yes. Why?" "Because I want to live." The honesty in her voice unsettled him more than any lie could have. "Why come to me?" he asked. She swallowed hard. "Because they say you are not cruel." The words struck him deeper than they should have. He was not cruel. But he was not foolish either. Harboring an Apache widow would brand him a traitor in town. Men already whispered about loyalties and land. The territory was tense. Fear ruled louder than reason. "Go back to the hills," he said after a long silence. "I won't shoot you tonight. But if others find you, I know what they will do." She stepped closer, closing the space between them. "That is why I came before they could." Ethan's pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" She lifted her chin again, and this time her voice cracked. "Kill me, or be my husband." The wind died as if the earth itself was listening. He stared at her, certain he had misheard. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. You live alone. Your land is wide. You have no wife." "That doesn't mean I need one." Her lips trembled, but she forced the words out. "It means I need protection. If I belong to you, they cannot touch me without challenging you." Men here respect ownership more than mercy. Ownership. The word tasted bitter in Ethan's mouth. "I am not cattle," she added quickly. "But I will work. I will cook. I will mend. I will earn my place. And if I refuse," she met his eyes without flinching, "then shoot me. I will not run anymore." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Ethan had always believed life was simpler than this. You protected what was yours. You avoided trouble. You survived. But this woman was trouble in human form. Trouble with hollow cheeks and stubborn courage. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Ayanna." The name felt like a spark in the cold air. He lowered the rifle completely. "I'm not going to kill you." Her shoulders sagged, not in relief, but in something heavier. "That leaves the other choice," she whispered. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "You don't understand what you're asking." "I understand perfectly," she said. "I am asking to live." He looked toward the distant lights of town barely visible through the snowstorm. If the other ranchers found out he was sheltering her, they would come armed. They would say he was betraying his own kind. But when he looked back at Ayanna, he saw no enemy. He saw someone who had lost everything. "Come inside," he said. She did not smile. She simply nodded and followed him toward the small wooden house that had stood lonely on the plains for 15 years. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace wrapped around them. Ayanna stood near the door at first, as if unsure she was allowed to breathe the same air. "You can sit," Ethan said. She remained standing. "I will not trap you with lies. I cannot give you love. My heart is buried with my husband. I'm not asking for love. I know." She met his eyes again. "But you deserve truth." He studied her carefully. There was no manipulation in her gaze. Only exhaustion and pride. "You said you would work," he said slowly. "I will. And if the town confronts me, I will stand beside you." The idea of her standing beside him, small but unyielding, stirred something unexpected inside him. He had been alone for years. After his mother died, after his father followed, the ranch had become both his refuge and his prison. Silence filled every room. He ate alone, worked alone, slept alone. He had told himself that was enough. But now there was a woman standing in his house, offering not love but partnership for survival. "You'll sleep in the spare room," he said finally. For now. Her breath caught slightly, and for the first time, her eyes shimmered with something close to gratitude. "I will not shame you," she said quietly. "I'm not worried about shame." He was worried about war. The next morning, the storm had cleared, but the consequences arrived with the sunrise. 3 horses approached the ranch just after breakfast. Ethan saw them through the window and felt his stomach tighten. Ayanna saw them too. "Your neighbors," she said. "Yes. Do you regret your choice?" He glanced at her. She stood straighter than she had the night before. Cleaned, fed, her natural strength showed through the weariness. She had braided her hair neatly and wrapped herself in one of his old coats. "No," he said, surprising himself. The men dismounted heavily. Thomas Grady, broad-shouldered and loud-mouthed, led the way. "Ethan," Thomas called. "Heard you had a visitor last night." Ethan stepped outside before they could enter uninvited. "What's it to you?" he asked calmly. Thomas smirked. "Word travels fast. Folks saw footprints. Small ones." Ayanna stepped out behind Ethan before he could stop her. The men froze. "There she is," one muttered. Thomas's expression hardened. "That's the thief." Ayanna's hands remained at her sides. She did not look away. "She is under my protection," Ethan said. Thomas barked a laugh. "Protection? She's Apache. She's a widow. And she's staying." The air shifted dangerously. "You choosing them over us?" Thomas demanded. "I'm choosing what's right." Thomas stepped closer. "You think she won't slit your throat in your sleep?" Ayanna's voice rang clear. "If I wanted him dead, he would already be." The boldness startled them all. Ethan almost smiled. Thomas's face reddened. "This ain't over." He mounted his horse and rode off, the others following. When they were gone, silence stretched across the land. "You may have made enemies," Ayanna said. "So have you," Ethan replied. For the first time, something almost like shared understanding passed between them. Days turned into weeks. Ayanna worked harder than anyone Ethan had ever known. She rose before dawn, tended chickens, mended fences, cooked meals that carried flavors he had never tasted before. Slowly, the house felt less hollow. But tension simmered beyond the ranch. Supplies in town became harder to acquire. Conversations stopped when Ethan entered the general store. Children whispered. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in blood-red streaks, Ayanna stood beside him on the porch. "Why did you truly let me stay?" she asked. He considered the question carefully. "Because I've been alone too long," he admitted. "And because killing someone who wants to live felt wrong." She looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing past the hardened rancher exterior. "You are lonelier than you pretend," she said softly. "And you are braver than you admit." A faint, almost invisible smile touched her lips. But peace rarely lasts where prejudice lives. One night, flames erupted at the edge of Ethan's fields. Someone had set fire to his hay storage. Ethan and Ayanna ran with buckets, fighting the blaze together. Sparks flew dangerously close to the barn. From the hill above, shadowed figures watched. "They're trying to scare you," Ayanna said through labored breaths. "It's working," Ethan muttered. But as the last flames died, something inside him hardened, not against her, but for her. The next morning, he rode into town. Ayanna waited on the porch as he disappeared into the distance. She knew what he was doing. Confrontation was inevitable. Hours later, he returned bruised and silent. "They want you gone," he said simply. "And you?" He dismounted slowly. "I told them you're my wife." Her breath caught. "You didn't have to." "Yes," he said, meeting her gaze. "I did." For the first time since she had stepped onto his land, tears slid down her cheeks, not from fear, but from something breaking open inside her. "I did not expect kindness to hurt," she whispered. He stepped closer, unsure what to do with her tears. "This isn't charity," he said quietly. "You saved this ranch as much as I did." She looked up at him, vulnerability replacing defiance. "I asked you to kill me," she said. "And I chose life." The distance between them felt smaller now, not forced, not transactional. Real. But danger was still gathering beyond the horizon. And neither of them yet understood how far the town would go to tear them apart. The threat did not arrive with shouting. It arrived with silence. 3 nights after Ethan declared Ayanna his wife, the ranch dogs did not bark. The wind did not howl. Even the cattle stood restless beneath a sky thick with clouds. Ayanna woke first. Years of living near danger had sharpened her instincts. She sat upright in the dark, heart pounding. The air felt wrong, heavy, waiting. She slipped from her bed and stepped into the hallway. "Ethan," she whispered sharply. He was already awake, pulling on his boots. "I hear it too," he murmured. Not a sound exactly. More like the absence of one. Then came the crack. A rifle shot shattered the stillness, splintering the porch railing inches from where Ethan had been standing moments earlier. "They've come," Ayanna said, her voice steady despite the fear flooding her veins. Ethan grabbed his rifle and motioned her back. "Stay inside." "No." The single word carried the same defiance as the night she had asked him to kill her. "This is my fight," he insisted. "It became mine the moment you said I was your wife." Another shot pierced the wall, embedding itself into the wooden beam near the fireplace. Dust rained down. Ethan cursed under his breath. He recognized the pattern now. Thomas Grady wasn't here to warn. He was here to force a choice. Outside, horses shuffled in the dark. Shadows moved between the trees. "They want to scare us out," Ethan whispered. "They want to make you choose between land and me." Ethan glanced at her. Even in the dim light, he could see the truth in her eyes. He had thought declaring her his wife would settle things. Instead, it had challenged every unspoken rule the town clung to. An Apache woman claiming space beside a white rancher was not something they could tolerate quietly. Another gunshot rang out, this one closer. Ethan stepped toward the door. Ayanna caught his arm. "If you die tonight," she said softly, "I will not beg again." The weight of those words settled heavily between them. "I'm not planning to die," he replied. He stepped onto the porch and fired a warning shot into the air. "Thomas!" he shouted. "This ends now." From the darkness, Thomas's voice answered. "It ends when she's gone." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She stays. You're throwing away your standing for her. She's my wife." The word carried differently now. Not a shield. A promise. Silence followed. Then Thomas rode forward just enough for moonlight to reveal his face. "You think this land will respect that?" Thomas spat. "You think the law will?" "I don't care what they think." Thomas raised his rifle slightly. "You will." Before Ethan could react, Ayanna stepped out beside him. Gasps rippled through the shadows. She stood tall despite the trembling in her legs. "You want me," she called into the night. "Then look at me." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "Ayanna, I am not a ghost stealing your chickens," she continued, her voice carrying across the fields. "I am a widow who lost everything to war and fire. I asked this man to kill me because I believed there was no place for me in this world." The men shifted uneasily. "He chose life," she said, glancing at Ethan. "If you burn this ranch, if you kill him, you prove only that fear rules you more than honor." Thomas sneered. "Honor? Yes," she said sharply. "You call yourselves men of faith and land. Yet you fear a hungry woman." Her words cut deeper than bullets. Ethan watched Thomas carefully. The man thrived on dominance, not introspection. But the others, some of them were wavering. "You think speeches change blood?" Thomas growled. "No," Ayanna replied. "But courage does." Before anyone could react, she stepped off the porch and walked toward them. "Stop," Ethan hissed. She did not. Each step felt like a lifetime. She walked until she stood just beyond the reach of their rifles. "If you must kill someone tonight," she said, lifting her chin, "kill me. But do not destroy a good man because he showed mercy." Ethan's breath caught. It was the same posture. The same unyielding defiance. "Kill me, or let me live." Thomas raised his rifle fully this time. Ethan aimed his own weapon, fury surging through him. "You shoot her," he warned, "and I promise you won't ride home." The standoff hung suspended beneath the moon. Seconds stretched unbearably. Then, unexpectedly, one of the younger men lowered his gun. "This ain't right," he muttered. Thomas shot him a glare. "You backing down? I didn't sign up to kill a woman." Another man shifted uncomfortably. "We burned his hay. That was enough." Thomas's authority cracked visibly. Ethan held his ground, but his entire body burned with tension. Ayanna did not move. Finally, Thomas spat into the dirt. You're making a mistake, Cole, he said coldly. Both of you. He turned his horse sharply and rode off. One by one, the others followed. The night swallowed them. Only when the last hoofbeat faded did Ethan drop his rifle. He crossed the distance to Ayanna in 3 long strides. What were you thinking? He demanded, gripping her shoulders. That fear must end somewhere, she replied, her voice trembling now that the danger had passed. You could have died. So could you. He stared at her, anger dissolving into something deeper. You don't have to keep proving you're brave, he said hoarsely. I am not proving anything, she whispered. I am choosing. He searched her face. The woman who had arrived starving and desperate was still there, but she was no longer asking to be saved. She was standing. And for the first time, he understood something clearly. He had thought he was protecting her. But she had been protecting him too, from bitterness, from isolation, from becoming the kind of man who looked away. The following weeks were not easy. Thomas did not return, but tension lingered in town. Some refused to trade with Ethan. Others avoided him entirely. Yet something subtle had shifted. A few quiet gestures began to appear. A sack of grain left anonymously near the fence. A nod from the blacksmith instead of a glare. The younger rancher who had lowered his gun stopped by one afternoon to help mend the damaged railing. Change did not roar. It crept. Spring arrived slowly, melting the harsh edges of winter. The fields began to green. The ranch, once scarred by fire, showed signs of renewal. One evening, as the sky blushed pink and gold, Ayanna stood in the doorway watching Ethan repair a section of fence. You never answered something, she said when he joined her on the porch. What's that? Why you truly told them I was your wife. He leaned against the railing thoughtfully. At first, he admitted, it was strategy. She smiled faintly. And now, he turned to face her fully. Now it's because I don't want you to leave. The simplicity of it made her breath catch. I told you my heart was buried, she said softly. I know. I don't know if I can love the way I once did. I'm not asking you to be who you were, he replied. Just be who you are. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they were not heavy with grief. I was ready to die the night I came here, she confessed. I believed I had no future. No worth. He reached out, hesitating only a second before taking her hand. You have more strength than anyone I've known, he said. You gave me something too. What? Purpose. The word lingered between them. For years, Ethan had simply existed, working land out of habit, not hope. Ayanna had forced him to confront the kind of man he wanted to be. Not one ruled by fear. One ruled by conviction. I don't need you to save me, she said gently. I don't need to, he replied. We stand together. A soft breeze moved across the plains, carrying the scent of new grass and distant rain. Ayanna looked out over the land that had once felt like enemy territory. It is strange, she murmured. I came here prepared to beg for death. And now, she intertwined her fingers with his. Now I want to live. Months later, when the town gathered for the harvest festival, Ethan and Ayanna rode in together. Whispers followed, but so did curious glances rather than hatred. Children stared openly at Ayanna's intricate beadwork. Women eyed her with cautious interest. The blacksmith's wife even approached to ask about a recipe she had heard rumored to be exceptional. Thomas stood at the far edge of the crowd, watching. He did not approach. But he did not turn away either. Change does not arrive in grand declarations. It arrives in moments when people choose something braver than fear. That night, as lanterns glowed warmly against the dark sky, Ayanna stood beside Ethan and felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Belonging. Not because she had surrendered who she was, but because she had refused to disappear. Later, back at the ranch, she stood on the porch where everything had begun. Kill me, or be my husband, she whispered, almost amused by the memory. Ethan stepped beside her. Still regretting it, he asked lightly. She turned to him, her expression soft but certain. No, she said. I am grateful you chose the harder path. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. So am I. The plains stretched endlessly before them, no longer empty but full of promise. Ayanna had once believed her only choices were death or dependence. Instead, she found partnership. Ethan had once believed protecting his land was enough. Instead, he discovered protecting a life changed his own. And in a world divided by fear, two stubborn souls proved that courage is not the absence of danger. It is the decision to stand anyway. Together.